Hi, and welcome to Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, a podcast series by Tharaka Foundation focused on youth mental health. Before we begin today's episode, I just wanted to let you all know that all content that is found in our podcast is created for informational purposes only. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, treatment, or therapy. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition, and never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you have heard in this podcast. Thank you so much, and without further ado, let's get started.
Welcome to a special Father Day episode of Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, brought to you by the Tarika Foundation, a non-profit committed to youth mental health, breaking stigma around emotional well-being, and empowering children and their learning parents to thrive. I'm your host, Punam here, and today we are celebrating modern fatherhood with all its messy, meaningful, and magical moments. Joining me is Christopher Chan, a full time IT professional, a full time dad, and a full time learner in the world of parenting twins. Yes, a boy and a girl alongside his equally brilliant and busy wife who also works in tech. Christopher, is it okay if I call you Chris?
Absolutely. Thank you, Punam.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy Father's Day and welcome to the show. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. And first of all, Punam, thank you for giving me the opportunity to join you on this podcast and just to have a moment to talk about this. I like how you introduced me as a lifelong learner in the school of parenting. Absolutely. I think one thing I've learned early on is, you never stop learning and there's no guidebook that really tells you how to be a parent. So thank you again. So my name is Chris. I work at Cisco. I lead our security customer programs here at Cisco. I've been at Cisco for 24 years, and my wife also works at Cisco in a different group. And as Punam mentioned, we are proud parents of a pair of twins, boy and girl, Adam and Annabelle, and they're turning 12 next month.
Thank you so much for introducing yourself. Let's start with the fun stuff. Two kids, two tech jobs. What does a typical day in your life looks like?
No, that's a great question, and it's also an important question too, because we do make deliberate choices, about balancing work and life and family and tech. And as I mentioned, both my wife and I, we work at Cisco, and we've been at Cisco for a very long time. And one thing we really value about working at Cisco is the flexibility that it does give us. To your question, what does a typical day looks like? We do like to prioritize the important moments of the day, which is the time we spend in the morning getting kids ready, nagging them to get ready for school, having breakfast, walking them to school so they do go to school nearby. So both my wife and I, we do plan ahead to see, who's going to be able to take the kids to school, and one of us will, and we plan that ahead because it's an important time of the day, and we want the kids to feel that we also value that time with them. So the day does start with alarm goes off roughly around 6:30 in the morning. We get ready. We nag the kids to get ready. As they get older, they tend to sleep in more. And then they get themselves ready, and then one of us or both of us sometimes will walk them to school. But we also preserve the time in the afternoon to go pick them up from school as well. Either I will or my wife will, and then we have our afternoon where my daughter typically has homework, and then they have various after school classes. So that's what a typical day, and obviously in between is work, and we do mostly work from home, which gives us the flexibility to do all of that.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing your typical day. And it's so beautiful to know you are planning ahead, you are communicating, and you are balancing both work as well as um, our parenting responsibility. And the thing I liked, thanks to our employer who do give us that flexibility to balance both the things. That's wonderful. I wanted to ask you another question. At Tarika Foundation, we talk a lot about building emotional regulation skills early. What have your twins taught you about your own emotional awareness?
I appreciate the question, and when you think back, they actually have taught me a lot, and maybe both in terms of my observation of how they behave, but also me understanding how they observe me. So maybe I'll start with the former. So I have a boy and a girl twin, and sometimes comparisons are just inevitable, right? As they grow up, we observe. We don't impose stereotypes on them, but we know what those stereotypes exist, right? Girls do tend to be more responsible, they mature faster, and I'll have to say in my family, it holds true. My daughter is seemingly the more mature one, both also emotionally too, right? She's very, again, not judging right or wrong, but just observing the differences. My daughter is actually very good at managing, regulating her emotions. She doesn't have any, you know, major, or any actually. She hardly ever has it. She manages her emotions well. My son, on the other hand, he still, I think, figuring that out. So he does, if things upset him, he does get upset still to this day when almost 12 years old. Sometimes he'll have tantrums. So just observing those differences is one way for learning. But the other thing, though, that I've also learned is that I've learned that kids, and this is probably true for all kids, they are observing and learning more than we are aware, which means also, especially when we work from home a lot, we do spend a lot of time together, whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not, they're observing how we behave with them in meetings, how we interact with people. And sometimes they would make some comments around, oh, Daddy, you seem frustrated out of this, call or meeting or whatever you had. And so I'm like, wow, I didn't realize they were paying attention. That also asked me to think about my own emotional awareness. Well, was that the right, should I have behaved that way? So I do tend to be also retrospective. I do play my day back regularly to say, hey, did I react well in that situation? Could I have handled it differently? But kids being in the home and they're observing us, they're also observing. So yes, both in terms of understanding, hey, I need to set a good example, but good example doesn't mean you hide your emotions, but also be more thoughtful about how you present and project your emotions. So, yeah, we have a lot to learn absolutely with having the kids in the house.
I agree with you, Chris. I am also a mother of two, a boy and a girl, and I learned a lot in my parenting journey. And you're absolutely right. We are kind of the role model for them. They see us every day. They learn from us, whether we realize or not. But you brought up a very good question. I wanted to ask, mental health often feel like a grown-up conversation. How do you bring it into daily life with your kids? As you were mentioning, sometimes our day might not be good. We are frustrated. So do you bring up such conversations with your kids?
Absolutely. One ritual that we do have, and I think most parents do this, is I don't think it's unusual at all. We definitely do like to ask about our kids' day. How was your day today? Tell me, what did you do at school? How was it? Did you play with friends? And sometimes they'll say, oh, we had a great day today. It was so fun. They come home super energized. Other times they may not be. So we use that as a way to talk through, not using a label as such as mental health, but just gauging into, oh, if things didn't go well, sometimes they might be a little bit disappointed. And we talk that through with them. And I think most parents do this. But what's interesting though is recently we had Mother's Day, and happy Mother's Day to you, Punam. And I had my kids record a little video reflection for my wife. And one question I asked them was, what's one thing that your mama does that really sort of has an impression on you? And my son actually said that, hey, I love how when I come home from school, mama always asks me about my day. So it's just forming that connection, and small things or big things, and they come home frequently with a lot of stories, right? Things that are important to them, and we do make time to listen to them, to ask about them, to show the interest. And I know a lot of parents do this, and I think it's good. And sometimes they're not reluctant to share anything. As you get older, they tend to share less. So we try to tease it out of them. So that's kind of how we think about it. And we talk through about how we react to different things. So, not all of us, we won't always have sunshine and rainbows every day. There'll be days where they say, oh, so and so wasn't nice to them, or maybe they felt slighted by somebody, and we'll talk through those things. So that's kind of how we have that conversation with them every day.
No, that's wonderful, Chris, because, labeling emotions, and all emotions are welcome. The
Exactly.
right? The key
Yeah.
to regulation is to acknowledge, yes, I'm feeling this way. And then, we can connect, okay, how do we take care of that feelings? That's beautiful. Having that ritual, having that connection, asking, how was your day? And you're absolutely right. Kids grow too fast, too soon. And then, parents may not be able to get all the answers. So, my
Yeah.
next question to you, you and your wife are both in high demand tech jobs, as you mentioned. How do you stay connected as co-parents and as partners?
That's an interesting question, and I've got a few different answers to that, if you will, coming from maybe different perspectives. One of the challenge, not a challenge, we have a very strong relationship for which I'm very thankful and grateful for, and it's largely due to my wife's. She's way more understanding and level-headed than I am, so I'm thankful for that. But I think when we do work at Cisco, same company, even though we're in different organizations, there's a lot of from a work front, there is some degree of crossover. So we do tend to talk about work matters a lot. So I said that's something that I'm sure both of us are conscious about. Uh, but you don't want to center your personal relationship around work too much either. So because funnily enough, over the last I think my wife's been at Cisco for 15 years. I've been at Cisco longer, 25 years. But regardless of which organization we're in, we do tend to have an overlap of things that we work on. So there's always that common thing. But I think that also helps because that builds empathy in our days because, whatever challenges we're facing, you have a strong level of understanding to begin with because you are in that space almost together. You know the stakeholders or the shifting business priorities. So that's one thing. But we also want to make sure we don't over rotate on it where every conversation just becomes about work. But the other half of my answer I wanted to share with you is also, well, my wife and I, we were actually long distance initially in early part of our relationship. I was working in Sydney. My wife was here in the Bay Area. We were long distance, for a year. We met through Cisco. But where I'm going with that is when you're long distance, especially this is going back, 15 plus years, like 18 years or so, you know, you don't have the readiness of FaceTime. Skype was still a thing, right? FaceTime wasn't really there yet. So when you're long distance, your relationship is ultimately built on communicating, right? You have to communicate to sort of sustain, grow that relationship. And I think that we were grateful that we had that foundation early on where we built a strong communication, you know, thing, which we then carried on, even though, I now live in the Bay Area. We have a family. So I think that's also important, how we stay connected. And I think as we mentioned earlier on, having the flexibility, be flexible with each other's schedule. And we have shared values, right? I think that's the other thing that works out well for us. We have a good shared value in terms of what's important to us as a family, what's important to us as the kids. Sometimes there's a little bit of disagreements on some little aspect of it. By and large, we're on the same page. So I think ultimately shared value, communicating, I think those are really empathy are probably the main things. And we all spend a lot of time together. So for us, family time is very important. So for us, family time is not taken away from like personal time or anything like that. It energizes us to spend time together as a family.
That's so beautiful, Chris, what you mentioned. Shared values and communication is the key for stronger relationship. And I'm glad you built that foundation so strong. Like right now, also you're using technology to help you stay connected and shared calendars. That's all beautiful advices. So my
Yep.
next question to you, what advice would you give other fathers, especially those juggling demanding careers, on being emotionally present for their kids? As you mentioned, family time is very important, and you do that. But other than that, what are your tips and tricks to stay emotionally present with kids?
Absolutely. And I do not claim to be an expert here, but I'll share with you kind of, again, my learning journey, right? It's very much a learning journey. And if I could, Punam, do me if I want to, there was a quote that I really like that I had saved on my phone. I'm just going to bring that up because I'm not going to do it justice if I were to try to repeat it. But it's something that I like to read a lot, and very frequently you come up with these snippets of wisdom, and I like to save it. So I have it here just to answer your question. Give me 1 second, okay? So there are two quotes. So this is by probably somebody that's a lot more famous, but the person said this: enjoy the little things, for one day you may look back and realize they were the big things. So that quote, I actually have it on my phone because I want to constantly remind myself. To your point, we all live very busy lives, and sometimes we don't make time for the small things, which sometimes when you look back, you say, "Whoa, that was actually the most important part of my day." But there's another quote, and this is again not a quote, but this is a thought that my wife sort of shared with me very early on when we were young parents. When the kids were probably less than 2 years old. And that's something she also shared with me, which has still remained with me to this day. It is very much along the lines of that, where she said to me, really cherish the time with our kids because we won't have that time with them forever. And and I think for me, it actually did light a light bulb in my head. I said, yeah, I didn't think about it at that time. When kids were young with twins, you're also the day is so busy. There's like so much stuff to do work-wise and looking after kids. And we live here in the Bay Area, so our families are overseas. So you didn't have to, I think being Asian families, if you're living back home, you have that extended family support that is so valuable. But we're here, so just grappling with two young kids, sometimes you do forget what's important. And I remember distinctively, and not in those words, but in the spirit of that, she said, really cherish this time because as they grow up, you're going to have less time with them. And this time you're going to look back and you're going to regret not having this time with them. And I think that's that for me. I'm constantly reminded of that, like to be emotionally aware, which is like we could be checking our phones. I enjoy watching the NBA. The Warriors were playing recently, and they tend to play during dinner time, which is kind of annoying. Like 6:30, when you're having dinner, the game is on, so the playoffs is happening. So I'm keeping an eye on the score. But what I try to do though is that when my kids starts talking to me, I will put that down, and because for me, I'm invested in the game, but I want to show them I'm invested in them more. That time with them is actually way more important than time with Steph Curry, even though he's amazing. I'll give you another example. Last week, my daughter in her class, they had this project called Spoken Word, where they had to write a poem and then they would recite it not just back to the class but to the parents. That's their evening event. And that was coinciding with the very important Game 7. Warriors was facing an elimination game against the Minnesota Timberwolves right at the same time slot. So my wife says, "Hey, you can stay home and watch the game. It's okay." I said, "No, I would not want to miss this. I'd rather go and attend and listen." And my daughter did a fantastic poem. I was really amazed by it. And I said to my wife, I don't think I could have written that at that age. So I think we all have to make trade-offs. I don't think there's ever a right answer. We have so many competing things that we juggle. That's sharing from my perspective, but it's also I'm remembering the words of my wife, which is like, "We prioritize this time," and I do really cherish this time with my kids. And I always ask them, "Hey, can you stop growing up? Because this age is like a golden age. They have their personalities." But they're not so old that they still listen to you, right? They probably still enjoy the time. So it's a great time, but that's really how I think about it. It is not easy. Everyone has to make different choices and make the best that they can. And we all have different balls that we have to juggle.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for sharing beautiful examples. So, what I learned from you, you don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present. And the
Yeah,
quality of the time, right? Like undivided attention is making difference. Like you don't need to spend hours and hours, but if you are fully present and you're giving that undivided attention, that will makes a difference. So, thank you so much.
exactly. Can I share one another example, Punam, just on that? So
Absolutely.
my kids take piano lessons, and I love listening to piano, even though I cannot play. But the sound is just, I really enjoy it. But we have to nag them every day to practice the piano, and they do it, but often with lots of reminders. But one ritual that I personally like to do is whenever my son or daughter are practicing the piano, where I can. Sometimes they do it when a meeting is going on. Obviously, I cannot. But if they're doing it after dinner, I always make it a point that I want to sit there in the living room and just really listen to them play. Because one, I want to reinforce that, yeah, your piano practice is important, but I'm also giving you my undivided attention there because I enjoy listening to you play, right? So it's sort of reinforcing that it's not just me harassing you to practice. It's I'm investing the time as well with you. And my wife did a lot too, even when they were earlier on in the day. She would spend time helping them understand the music theory. Now when you look at the sheets that they play, it's a complete gibberish. It looks so complex, but my wife also invested a lot of time she also spent time teaching them, Chinese, right? She's a very, very strong, Mandarin speaker. I'm not, but she spends the time there to teach them. I invest a little bit more time sometimes to help them with their math. So again, those are the times where they feel like it's chores that they're doing, but we want them to see that, hey, but we're invested in this with you. We're not just asking you to go do it. We want to be there with you as you complete these things, and will help you or enjoy the fruits of your labor as you are just playing this beautiful piece that is so complex. There's no way I don't have that same ability, but I want to show that, we're being present there as well. So just investing the time with them.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for sharing your experience with us. You have given such an honest and hopeful picture of fatherhood, not as perfection, but as a practice.
Far from perfection. Absolutely.
Yeah. To all the fathers listening today, happy Father's Day. Whether you are a bedtime story pro, a Lego building champion, or just trying to make it enough the next virtual meeting without a snack interruption, we see you. We are helping shape the emotional words for our next generation, and you are part of it. So this is Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, a podcast by the Tarika Foundation, where we believe strong minds and open hearts start at home. Until next time, keep showing up, keep learning, and keep thriving. Before we wrap up, we want to leave our listener with some thoughtful questions, prompt, and that spark meaningful reflection and connection, as Chris did. So my hope is all the fathers listening to us will have a happy Father's Day, and they will reflect these questions what just Chris shared with us. Again, thank you so much, Chris, for joining us today and sharing your fatherhood journey with us.
Thank you so much, Punam. I definitely enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks again.
You are listening to Mindful, Beautiful, and Thriving, a podcast series by Tharaka Foundation. As part of our youth series, we will be releasing new episodes every month, so make sure to continue to check those out. We hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we thank you so much for listening.